Welcome to Smart Remarks, where the sun never sets on the American empire unless we run out of money. So a friend this week passes along an article by a guy named Nick Turse called Empire of Bases 2.0, the idea being that no one really knows how many U.S. military bases there are around the globe. Turse writes that there could be as many as 1,180. In fact, there could be more. There might be as many as 400 U.S. and coalition bases in Afghanistan alone. Might be because there's a lot of bases that are publicly unacknowledged. We have a lot of black sites. But whatever the actual number, what seems abundantly clear is that the U.S. military maintains what the late analyst Chalmers Johnson called an empire of bases so large and shadowy that no one, not even at the Pentagon, really knows its full size and scope. Now, there's moral arguments to be made about this. This is all part of the Pax Americana, our desire to project power throughout the globe. No other nation has anything remotely like this, and some would argue that our ability to put boots on the ground virtually anywhere in the world has ensured an unprecedented global stability. Others would look at places like Iraq and Afghanistan and say, what stability? But the real question that rarely gets asked is, what does this empire of bases cost? You know, Americans don't like to use the term empire. We don't think of ourselves that way, but it's wholly appropriate. And now, as Americans are concerned about government spending and government debt, it's also appropriate to ask how much this empire of bases costs and whether it's worth the money. But the answer is that this, too, might be unknowable. In 2010, Turse reports that construction and housing costs alone on U.S. bases cost $23.2 billion. Maintenance, repair, and recapitalization costs $14.6 billion. Quote, and that likely doesn't even scratch the surface of America's base world in terms of its full economic cost. So here's the question. In the age of austerity, can we afford the Pax Americana? As we talk about freezing discretionary spending and fret about the cost of entitlement programs, how many of our overseas bases are on the budgetary chopping block? Shouldn't at least some of them be? Do we really need to maintain bases in places like Germany and Okinawa all these years later? You know, the Tea Party has talked about cutting military spending, and I'd like to think that they mean it, but then this past week you had Kentucky Senator Rand Paul issuing his plan to cut $500 billion from the federal budget. He would trim education funding by 83%. He would eliminate the Department of Energy. He would cut military spending by 6.5%. And so we see that the Tea Party isn't really serious about cutting military spending, but maybe they could at least agree that Americans have the right to know how many military bases we have and what it all costs, because this knowledge is instrumental if we're going to assess whether it's worth this cost. But see, you, citizen, aren't supposed to ask these questions. You are merely supposed to accept that this is necessary for your well-being. This stuff's on a need-to-know basis, and you don't need to know.
Look, one of the reasons why we have a spending morass, which neither Mr. Ryan nor the President mentioned, is the fact that the spending for war is costing us trillions of dollars, as Joseph Stiglitz and Linda Bilmes have so well articulated in their recent book. We have to keep in mind that the Pentagon is taking 50% of discretionary spending. It's funny, when people want to talk about limited government, they never talk about starting to eliminate this expansion of the Pentagon and this expanding wars that are costing American taxpayers.
So you think if that's taken out of the equation and some of the